In this video, I'm going to be changing the rear shocks on this E65 BMW. This is a 750. I'm going to be replacing it with these Bilstein shocks. The part number for your reference is as follows. That is the part number, left and right are the same. Right, so I've jacked it up there at the jack point towards the back of the car. There's the first trestle. Then I have a backup trestle there by the diff. If the trestles do fail, which is unlikely, at least I have a tire there which adds some extra protection.
On this repair, the left and the right are different. On the side with the fuel tank, you must take the wheel arch cover off because it's very difficult to get the shock out, and also to return the shock, the TIS manual says take the wheel arch cover off. However, on the other side, it's not necessary to take the wheel arch cover off. So in this video, I will be taking the wheel arch cover off just to show you the method that I followed. There are some tips and tricks provided along the way. It is quite an extra bit of work to get that wheel arch cover back on.
For this repair, I have to remove this covering, the wheel arch cover. Now it's a combination of size 8 screws as well as some push pins or panel pins, and then in certain places there's actually plastic nuts which are size 10 which have to be unscrewed. You'll also have to open this. This is where the brake sensor and the ABS sensor wires are feeding, but in this case I'm on the other side of the car and it's only got the one sensor, so I just need to detach the sensor and then remove this plastic. Right, so you just need to squeeze this and separate this. You'll find that it's very snug. So what I do to help it is take my screwdriver, put it in the side there, and I actually just turn it just to unseat it a little bit. Now I just feed that in there, and there are 2 push pins which need to be just pulled out from here. So I just take my pliers and I grab it, and there, 1, 2. Right, then this can come out. Now there's a clip low down here. I just need to open the clip and release this from the cover. That one is going to go inside there. Now I just need to open all the screws and panel pins. Right, so there's a number 10 nut over here, and then there's another number 10 up here. Now using a size 8, I unscrew all the little screws. Don't forget the one over here. So that's 4 screws. Then there's some panel pins. Right, what I do is I take my screwdriver and I just lift it a bit. And once I've lifted it, I just take my pliers and just pull it out. What I also do is I take a pair of pliers. I don't cut it, I just wedge it. So you can use the mouth of the pliers to actually pull the head off. This one is particularly tight. Right, so there it's come out. There's another screw here, number 6. Right, what I find works is unhooking it along the wheel arch. Then I pull it from underneath here, pull it down. Make sure that that wire, that cable is inside. You don't want to snap the head of that cable. Right, then this can come out. Now on the exhaust side there is a heat foil here. You just have to unhook it and unhook there. There's a little piece of metal that goes around there, so unhook that, and now the wheel arch is out. So you're looking out for that, and that. Right, now we need to remove the stabilizer link.
For this repair, you only need to remove the bottom of the stabilizer link. Where I'm pointing to, you can actually leave that nut closed. If you need the extra space, or if you're struggling to get the shock in, then yes, take the entire stabilizer link out, but actually it's fine if you just do the bottom part. In this video, I'll show you how to remove the entire stabilizer link.
Now there's an Allen key, it's a size 5, but actually the fitting wants a Torx, but a size 5 Allen key will work. The Allen key is going to sit there. Then what I need to do is I need to take a spanner, but notice this spanner allows me to turn it without having to remove it. And I'm not saying you can't do it without this, but this does make it a lot easier. So coming from the exhaust side, you're going to loosen that while that Allen key is holding the inner inside in place so that ball joint doesn't rotate. Then you need to do the same with this nut, Allen key, and then rotate the nut. These are size 18. Right, so once you've removed the size 18 nut there, and then at the top there you can see I've removed the stabilizer link. Now we're heading to the shock screw. Now this is very tight, you might need a breaker bar. This is also a size 18. I'm just going to tap with a hammer here while pressing over here. There we go. Okay, so the shock is now just held in place by the top screws, which I'm going to get to now. And all I need to do is now get into the boot. All right, so I'm here at the trunk, and what I got to do is I got to get this whole cover off. The best way to do it is to remove the rubber here. So guide the rubber with your fingers. You don't need to go all the way, just to where that is. And then now you need to remove this. I've already done it, but I'll quickly show you what to do. There's 4 of these push pins. Just pull out the top and then it comes out. Then this actually comes out. Right, so this has come out, and just to show you, there's a push pin on the corner there, and then on the other side there's 2. If you can't finding it's quite difficult to get out, just because it's seated under this cover over here. Now we have to get this out, so there's also a few of these. So I just insert my screwdriver underneath, and then I just pull the top off, and actually in this case both came out at once. There's one here, there's one there, there's one on the top here, and then there's a screw which needs to be removed over here. Right, then you can actually remove this, fold it inwards, and then pull it out. Now there might be some noise treatment, you can remove it. Now this is an EDC shock, so there's the wire, but I'm replacing it with a non-EDC shock. So I'm just going to unplug it, which you'd have to do anyway, and then I'm going to remove the EDC clip. Now there are 3 nuts there that need to be released. I'm just using a size 13 socket, and I'm just feeling for them. I can't actually see them, but I can feel for them, and there we go. So we're going to just remove the 3. Right, so getting the shock out, the best way is to let it seat in the little groove there. There's a groove there on the control arm, so it's there, and then it actually just comes out. Then it comes out at an angle. However, on the side of the fuel tank, it doesn't come out as easy as that. You have to get it in that wedge. Then what you need to do is press this down in order to get the shock out. You will need 2 people, because this you have to press down quite a lot. Then once you've pressed this down, the shock comes this way, and then you can take it out. So in this case, the side of the fuel tank is much more difficult than the other side. Right, so here is the old shock. Now before I open the old shock, I want to show you this platform on the top here. This is a rubber here, and it's actually skew. So when you're inserting this, you might be concerned because this is skew. So obviously you can replace this. In this case, I'm not going to replace it, but best practice obviously is to replace. There you can see the bump stop. Yes, so the bump stop is definitely damaged, and it's got this little cover that goes with the bump stop, which is actually broken off the damper there. Why I'm showing you this is when you rebuild your shock, you might be concerned by this offset on the top here being a little bit angular. If you look inside here, there's actually a gap. There's a gap here, and that is normal. So when you rebuild your shock, don't be alarmed if there's a bit of a gap there. Right, now ideally, if you can take this to a workshop and they've got a proper hydraulic spring compressor, that would be the best. It'll clamp it there, and it will depress the spring, and then you can open this much easier. But I'm just going to be using the home spring compressors. Right, so there I've got my 3 spring compressors, and now I'm going to tighten them. When we use spring compressors, you must not use a impact driver, you must use a wrench. Now once you are able to insert the screwdriver there, and you can see that it is quite loose, so now I can release this nut. Right, so it's the nut, the plate faces upwards, the shock mounting, the top of the shock mounting. That's what it looks like. It is quite worn, but I am going to reuse it. It's not torn anywhere, and it's on the back. Just for your reference, this can be removed. This is still intact, and that is why I'm going to reuse it. Sometimes you find there's a crack around here and you'd have to replace it, but in this case I just put this back. It's still in working order, and I'm going to refit this on the new shock. Then there's another plate now facing downwards. Then we have what's left of the bump stop, and I can take the spring off. Here's the original shock, and you can see that it just collapses down to the bottom. This one you can see has collapsed, although it does still have some shock absorber capability. I can feel that it's quite hard to pump, so it's not completely stuffed. Right, now there's a little rubber here which I'm going to reuse. So I'm going to peel this off gently. It might be a bit brittle, so we don't want to crack it. Right, so you can dispose of the old shock now. Right, so the back shock absorber, you just need to put the cap here. Make sure you seat it in this orientation. The coil is going to go around here. Then we need the rubber, then the little protective cap. Now the old sleeve and bump stop were one unit, but as you can see, it's totally disintegrated. It's very old, so you would have to get a new one of these. Right, now something else which I'll bring your attention to, the old shock is quite thick, while the B4 replacement shock from Bilstein is actually thinner. Now that's a problem because even if the bump stop was in working order, you can see that it's got a wobble. So that's concerning, while on the original you can see that it's fine, it sits nicely. So in my case, I am going to still put a bump stop, but I'm going to just cut one to size. Right, then I'm going to use this bump stop. Now put this cap on in this orientation, facing down. Then just a little bit about this. If you have a look, you'll see that this one's quite worn and it's actually uneven here. It's almost sitting at an angle, probably because in the trunk you'll see that the posts where this seats into, you'll see that the chassis where this seats into is at a bit of an angle, and I'm sure that this has deformed over time. I'm not replacing this, but I'm just bringing to your attention that once you seat this on, you might find that it sits at a bit of an angle. If you can replace this part. This it's unnecessary to replace because you can see it's just really a rubber stopper. If it's still in working order, then just reuse it. But do note that when you insert this, there are these posts over here, which are these on this side. So the back of them is there. So on the rubber, there is spaces for where those posts are going to sit. So these little recesses must be placed correctly, otherwise you're going to increase your ride height by about 3 mils. And then I just got to make sure that that end of the coil has got to go to that end over there. There's a space there, so I can seat that now. Once I release the coils, it will lift up and then it will go there. I'm just going to put the top washer so long. Notice that this saucepan type washer faces upwards, and there's the nut. Now it's a good idea to tighten this nut to the correct torque value before you release the spring. Right, so this is a size 6. Right, this gets torqued to 27 Newton meters. The most important part in this installation is that this is flush and the coil ends are sitting right against the rubbers. So we've got that side there. There you can see it's flush on the bulge of that rubber. Now my spring clamps did remove a little bit of this protective covering. I'm just taking some enamel spray paint and just spraying it so it can't rust. Right, once your shock is assembled, we just want to align these posts here. These are all equidistant from each other. Now that pin over there, or that post over there, is going towards the back, which means that I've got to align this. We don't want to install it and it's like that. It's got to be like that. This is facing outwards. Now having a look at this, if this is facing outwards, then the backmost post is not quite in line. It's about 20 degrees more towards the left. So a quick way to do it is to just insert the shock and just check that the alignment is right. If it's not, all you need to do is just take a screwdriver, just put it in there, and then you can hold that with your feet. And if you need to make some changes, you can turn this. It will be a bit tight, but it will turn nevertheless. Just make sure if you are turning this that you haven't unseated the spring. The spring must be pushed all the way to the edge of the rubber. Right, now to get this in, this is the procedure I follow. Right, so I insert it there like that towards the back. So the shock is actually on this side, and there is a space there, and I push it between that space. Now the minute it goes in that space, you can see how I can actually seat it inside. Now just careful for these wires, don't let the wire get caught on the post, which it had already done. You see, you must check that the wires are not going to be compressed under the shock there. And now all I need to do is align it to those 3 holes, and then from the trunk tighten the nuts one by one. Right, if you don't have someone to hold the shock while you are screwing it into the chassis, I just use this rubber boot. and it held in place while I screwed it into the chassis. Make sure there's nothing in the way there. As you can see, the wire's out of the way. Now I do use the blue thread locker on these nuts. Now using a number 13, I just tighten these nuts one by one. Right, using your torque wrench, tighten it to between 27 and 30 Newton meters. Now we need to get this shock to seat in there. Now this is higher than the shock. So what I need to do is press this down, and when I press this down, quickly put the shock to seat in here. Now please don't use the screw as leverage to get the shock in. Either ask someone to press this down or use your knee, and the shock actually stays in place once you've seated in there, so you don't have to worry. You just need to get it in there and then it will sit. Now note that is facing this way. That is why it's important to check your alignment before you install the shock. Mine is a little bit off center, but it's fine. It will seat fine and it will adjust once the car is driven. I managed to push this down with my foot. Now I just need to insert this long screw. I'm going to put some thread locker on the screw. Don't put your face anywhere near this, because if it comes out, it'll knock your teeth out. Right, this needs to be torqued to 165 Newton meters. Right, now it's time to install the stabilizer link. Right, the nut on the bottom comes with a washer, there you can see, and this one is torqued to 60 Newton meters. The one on the top has no washer, and if I'm not mistaken, it's 100 Newton meters. That is pretty tight. I'll also put some thread locker. I have worked on cars where this is actually loose. So while 100 Newton meters seems to be quite high, unless I've misunderstood the TIS manual, just put some thread locker on this nut. It does come loose. This does rotate and it can make this nut come loose. Right, the next step is to fit the wheel arch. My advice is to take a blower and blow around here so that when you're fitting this, you don't have sediment all falling on your head. Right, now when reinstalling the wheel arch, this sensor wire over here needs to be threaded through this hole over here. So there are 3 holes. It's the top hole for the sensor wire. If you are on the other side of the car, you'll have 2 wires coming through, one for the brake wear sensor and one for the ABS sensor. Then over here we've got this. It sits like this, and it actually holds the bumper in place. Now this thing often falls off. You just need to seat it in there like that. Now on this side there's a heat shield. You can see the heat shield is there. Once I've installed the wheel arch cover, I've got to just bend these little foil clips. Then on the top left, there's a post for a nut, a screw post, and then there's one on the other side there. Those are very good in getting the alignment of this. Now I'm going to quickly talk you through the method that I use to get this on. Right, there's the wire coming through the top hole. These 2 are for the push pins. Nothing else must be threaded through there. Now I'm going to head to this side here and get this to be held in place. There's a screw post somewhere there, so I'm going to get ready to screw that one in. Support it so that you don't put unnecessary stress on this wire. Make sure it is completely over the shock and there's no wire sticking out there. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to align that nut to the post that is going to be coming out when I get this in the right place. Right, so it's that post which is going to come through on that side over there. Right, so that and that hold it in place. I can now seat everything. So I'm going to start with the press pins and the screws all along here. Make sure that when you do fasten it, that the bumper is fastening down at the same time, because some of them have little brackets which tighten the bumper on. For example, some of the screws attach into some of these along the root. Right, so I don't tighten any of these screws until I've seated all the push pins, because if you tighten the screw and it's a little bit off center, there's a few pieces that sandwich together. It's very hard to get the push pin in. So once I've got all the push pins in, then I only tighten screws. If you're finding that the screw will not go in properly, means you've done something wrong. Rather open the nearby screws and then just see if there's something that hasn't been seated properly. Sometimes you just need to put a screwdriver in the hole just to align the things. Just careful for hammering push pins, because these little clips might fall out. Only once everything's tight would I hammer a push pin. Now on the underside, don't worry if you haven't clipped these and you've already installed this wheel arch cover, because these are very malleable. So you just need to thread it through the hole there. So I've left this one open. I can just show you by bending this plastic, I can actually just lift it and get this inside. And then there's another piece that has to be seated over here. Don't worry if you hadn't seated it, just bend this back and then put it into place. And then don't forget the last screw there. That's been wrapped, and that heat shield flange has also been wrapped. Right, once you've installed your shocks and you've closed up there, you just need to come here and put the heat treatment back if there was any, and then just put the side panels in. Now when you put the panel in, make sure you don't go over that lip. So you want to be on this side. There's actually a space for where this seats. So I just literally line it up where this line is, and I just go like this. Right, so return the right and the left, put the push pins back in, then return this piece over here. Remember, it's got a seat underneath this, so it's got to go like that. Right, just put the beading back on. Right, when you're fitting these two panels, just make sure the one on the side goes under the one at the back. And the same on that side, it goes under the one at the back. Now, if you're finding that these are not aligned properly and you can't get this in, it means you've made a mistake. It means you either haven't pushed it back enough or this isn't seated properly. So if I just show you how it seats perfectly well.
Right, once you've done your shock repair, you need to do the ride height assessment. This is the ride height for the E65, and notice it says in normal position. It does not say anything about sandbags or weighing down the car, so I just have a full tank of petrol. Right, for the rear of the car, it gives a tolerance of 1 centimeter, and then between left and right, it also gives a tolerance of 1 centimeter. So in my case, it's a 19-inch rim, so the ride height must be 64.4, but that could also mean 63.4 up to 65.4 because of the 1 centimeter tolerance. It also allows a left to right tolerance. That means if on the right-hand side, I get 64.4, on the left-hand side, if I got 63.4, it would still pass the test. Right. Please check your rim size, and these are the measures you should get if you are using the air springs or the sports suspension. I just keep this here so you can have a quick look.
Right, after doing your shock absorber repair, it's very important to measure the ride height. Now, in this case, we measure the ride height from the bottom of the mag, the rim, to the top of the wheel arch. This is a 19-inch mag, so the ride height for the E65 BMW is 64.4 centimeters. Right, in this case, it is 64.6 centimeters. It is within the spec. I'll now measure the other side. Right, this side is about 64.7 within the spec.